Let's face it, the world likes to think that Jews look a particular way, and I don't look like that. My dad is black and Native American, and my mom is Jewish. But the fact is, I grew up with very little religion. We celebrated Hanukkah, but that was about it. I didn't have a strong Jewish identity. Then I took a trip to Israel.
I've been on a Jewish pathway practically from the cradle, starting with Jewish preschool, then Hebrew school, and later in high school, even getting involved in Jewish leadership programs. But that's not where my Jewish journey really began. It began with Daniel, my youngest brother.
My Jewish roots run deep. My grandfather was born in the state of Israel before it became the Jewish state. My father was born in Iran and can trace his lineage back to the time of the First Temple. He escaped just before the revolution, and as a Jew, he knew he can never return to his childhood home. But even with all that, it wasn't until my brother moved to Israel and joined the IDF, right on the eve of war, that I realized how important our Jewish homeland was to my own identity.
I grew up in Vancouver, in a really active Jewish community, in a family that was passionate about Judaism. So I knew that giving back would be an essential part of my continuing Jewish journey. I just never dreamed I'd be continuing it in a small Jewish community in a little country on the Baltic Sea.
When my brother Daniel was just 4 years old, he got sick. For 6 years, he battled Batten disease, and then in 2010, he slipped away from us. That's when we experienced the Jewish mourning process firsthand, and we learned how wonderful and incredibly special our Jewish Federation community was. They gave us comfort, support, and saw us through a terrible ordeal. That's when my Jewish journey really began. Now I'm a student at UC Irvine, and it's my turn to give back to my Jewish community.
Being in Israel was the first time I saw Jews of all colors. I saw Jews from Yemen, from Ethiopia, from South America, and just about every other part of the world. They made me feel truly welcome, and it was there that I saw that being Jewish could take on many forms. And that's what inspired me to start the website, youdon'tlookjewish.com. I wanted to create a resource that was a space where people could talk openly about Jewish diversity, and also a resource where people could learn more.
During the Second Lebanon War, rockets rained down on northern Israel for 34 days. My family stayed glued to the TV. We were anxiously watching the news and praying for my brother's safety. We were proud of his commitment and of the country he served, and his being right there on the front lines, it really deepened my bond to Israel. A few years later, when I went to Texas A&M University, it was my other brother who further influenced my journey. He'd been very, very involved with Hillel. So when I arrived on campus, Hillel was obviously how I could connect Jewish life. Everyone there, they welcomed me immediately. Through Hillel, I was able to find a Jewish community. I was in an open environment where I could discuss politics, life, religion, relationships, and even my own Jewish roots. They made a powerful impact on my own life. In fact, impact is probably the best word I could use to describe how Federation programs have made a difference in lives like mine.
At school, I fight stereotypes and anti-Israel sentiment every day. But I came to UC Irvine because I wanted to make a real difference, to create opportunities for open dialogues between students, no matter how they feel about Israel. I knew it would be tough, but that I could do it. Federation had prepared me. Through the Jewish agencies Masa Israel and Onward Israel immersive programs, you've enabled me to see Israel through my own eyes. I was able to sit down and share experiences with Israelis and Palestinians my age, all over the country. We may not have always agreed, but we were able to find common ground, to listen and understand both sides of the story, to work towards solutions that were pro-human and could benefit us all. Now, I'm able to bring that experience to UC Irvine. I'm able to tell a Jewish-Arab story of cooperation and mutual respect firsthand.
At university in Montreal, I wanted to connect to the broader Jewish community. That led me to Federation, which led me to much more. Mentorship through Jewish Family Services, leadership training. Soon I was Googling Jewish humanitarian jobs. And what popped up first? JDC Entwine's Global Jewish Service Corps, an amazing opportunity to live and serve in overseas Jewish communities and really make an impact. I was like, wow, how have I never heard of this before? I really hope they'll take me. And they did. All the way to Estonia, a country where Nazi invasion and Soviet rule had almost extinguished Jewish life. My own family is from Poland and Belarus, and when I left, my mom gave me a photo of my great-grandparents, saying, they'd be so proud you are going into a country where Jews were once not welcome. I went to Estonia to help and inspire a community, and in the end, they were the ones who inspired me.
When I got back from Israel, I became a resident in Moishe House. It helped me connect to other young Jews. The community around me, the meals we share, and the conversations we have, it's my rock and my home base. And I even served as a resident representative on the National Board of Directors. I'm working to ensure that we're welcoming to all Jews. And what's really amazing about Moishe House is it's become a global movement. Right now we have 92 houses in 21 countries around the world. So on Friday night, when I light our Shabbat candles, I'm picturing people at Moishe houses across the planet doing the exact same thing.
My Hillel involvement did not stop with graduation. I became a Springboard Fellow, so now I'm working for them. I'm continuing my own Jewish journey by bringing that unique sense of community to another generation of students. It's just one small way I can pay it forward, by helping others along their own Jewish identity.
Even though BDS is still a vocal presence at UC Irvine, I am not giving up the fight. I'm working to make it a campus where Jewish students, and all students, can feel safe and at home.
I'm back in Canada now, at law school. I plan to combine Jewish humanitarian work with a law career, but I'll always carry with me what I learned in Estonia. When you're committed, you can make a difference. No matter how small your numbers are, you can make the world a better place.
Some journeys take you full circle to your beginnings. This year I attended something really big, the White House Hanukkah party. And I brought my mom with me. And when we walked through the doors, she looked at me and said, "These people look like my grandmothers, and they talk like my mom and dad." And something clicked. And now my mom is reconnecting with her Jewish heritage because of me. What could be a better impact for Federation than that?
We are all proud of the steps we've been able to take with the support of Federation.
And we realize we still have an even greater journey ahead of us.
Thank you.
For paving the way.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Chair of National Women's Philanthropy, Judy Altenberg, and the immediate past Chair of JFNA's Board of Trustees, Michael Siegel.
It's been just 5 days since the 2016 presidential election, and I'm sure we're all asking the same thing. What happened? What's next? And what does it mean for the United States, North America, Israel, the Jews, and the world?
Well, while it's too late in the day to watch Meet the Press, We're fortunate to be joined today by that program's host. Chuck Todd, one of the most respected journalists and political commentators in America today, is here to lead us in our own version of his Sunday morning talk show.
Thank you. Our roundtable discussion has two acts. First, we'll explore the domestic implications of the elections. Chuck, who we'll be hearing from today?
The New York Times. A good friend of mine, and who has spent a lot of time covering the Trump campaign, Maggie Haberman. There you go. She has way too many first-hand experiences to share, and we only have 20 minutes, unfortunately. And then from the Hudson Institute, the CEO, Ken Weinstein. Ken, thanks very much. We were just joking. I begin every Meet the Press meeting, and I really do. What does this mean for the Jews? We always make that joke. Myself and my EP, we're both Jewish. We always say, ultimately, it always comes back to that. What does this mean for the Jews? A little lighthearted humor, right? Come on.
If it's not.
All right, let me just simply start here with this question. Did Donald Trump win, or did Hillary Clinton lose? Maggie, you first.
Yes. No. I think.
Yes and no. Okay. Next one.
Yes and yes. I think that Donald Trump won to the extent that he clearly had tapped into something, a message that was resonant. A lot of this election, and you are much smarter about this than I am, but I think broke down to city versus non-city. And so there, looking at the map of where people voted and how they voted, it's like a giant sea of red, and then corners of blue that are mostly urban areas. So Trump recognized something that was resonant. He spoke almost exclusively about jobs and the economy. He didn't necessarily speak with any coherence about policy, but he used the words repeatedly. Mm-hmm. And Hillary Clinton basically didn't. I mean, she almost never talked about it, and she forewent an entire segment of the population by ignoring white working class voters for a very, very long time. I think that there was a cumulative weight with Hillary Clinton's campaign. I do think the Comey letters hurt her. I think that's a reality. I think WikiLeaks hurt her, but I also think that Goldman Sachs speeches hurt her in 2013 and 2014, and I think that just sort of basic decisions that she had made, combined with the fact that elections are fundamentally about the future, this turned out to be a tremendous change year.
Ken, it's extraordinary that Donald Trump is going to have over 300 electoral votes, and he's going to lose the popular vote by almost 2 percentage points when all is said and done. It is split-screen America is what I called it this morning. I mean, literally, half of the country is euphoric, half of the country wants to know what happened and where their country went, which, by the way, 8 years ago, half the country was euphoric, well, 53% of the country was euphoric, and 47% of the country wanted to know what happened to their country, and all of a sudden, role reversal.
Look, it's very challenging. I think it's incumbent, and I thought I give credit to President Obama, to Secretary of State Clinton for being so incredibly gracious in their concession speeches and talking about the future of the country. And I think it's incumbent upon President-elect Trump and Vice President-elect Pence to reach out, to engage in discussion with, and to show, which I think we've seen now in the transition, and we've seen in the interviews that President-elect Trump is doing, an openness to a broader discussion on policy issues, and also an openness, which we're also seeing, I think, in the transition to incorporating people who are not part of the inner circle in the White House, in the key federal agencies. It's important to show the rest of the country that they understand that the challenge is that they're governing the entire country. And I think for the first few days, the signs have been largely very positive.
I want to go at this question a little bit differently, though, about before we get off the election, which is this, because it's a question I'm guessing, Maggie, you get as much as I get, is how did we miss this? Mm-hmm. Why was this such a big miss? And I mean, there is this, I can't believe he won. The Republican Party thought she was going to win. Mm-hmm. The Democratic Party thought she was going to win. What was the miss?
The Trump campaign also thought she was going to win, and this is
That's what I mean. No,
this is an important point, though, that I think that we're doing, and I will get to your question, but yeah. I do want to just set the record pretty clear here.
Donald Trump thought he was going to lose. Everybody in that room with him that night thought he was going to lose. To your point, she won the popular vote by almost 2%. They're still counting votes, so we won't know yet, but it's going to be something like that. He won by a couple of tens of thousands of votes in like 3 states. So this was not a huge landslide or blowout. It was an incredibly close election. We are still basically a 50-50 country. The miss was, I think, not that people did not, there were a couple of misses, and there were clearly, there is a lot of blame to go around for the media, and I share that view. There was a poll that you guys had at the fall of 2015. I remember emailing with your colleague, Mark Murray, about this at the time. It was the first time, I think, that the Wall Street Journal NBC poll showed that there were, I think, 8 candidates who could have been, potential nominees polled. Only 2 were Democrats, but everybody else was Republican. But everybody except Bernie Sanders was underwater. They were viewed unfavorably. And that's not about the candidates. Most of them were not really known. That was an angry, angry, angry electorate that was just in a throw the bums out mood. There was a, I think, psychic break with the electorate and its leaders after the 2008 fiscal crisis, after Obamacare, after many things that I think that we did miss. I think that the main reason we missed it, frankly, a couple of things. The data, the tools that we used to assess this didn't work. The data was not right. But I also think that, I think that because Trump was saying things, I get asked a lot, is Trump a racist? And I have no idea what's in his heart, but I know it doesn't really matter. I know what he's saying. That he is saying things that are offensive and has said things that are offensive as a candidate. But my point is that I think that got too conflated with the idea that that would be a disqualifier. And I think we all thought that the things that normally are disqualifying for candidates in elections or have been would apply. 60% of the country, I think, in the exit polling said that he was unqualified to be president. Right. He's now the president-elect.
Ken, one of my favorite metaphors, I think, came from Matt Bai. And he said, Trump Clinton, he thought of it as, I think he used it as sort of the terminal cancer patient. You're a terminal cancer patient, and Hillary Clinton is offering you a whole bunch of Tylenol, and Donald Trump is offering you an experimental drug. Right. It might grow an extra head. It's likely going to kill you, but there's a 1% chance it could save your life. Do you pick Tylenol or that 1%? And that's perhaps some of these voters were thinking that.
Totally. I think the level of frustration in the country, which is something that we in Washington, we in New York, those of you in the media.
Los Angeles, Chicago. Let's know. This is important. Every major city in America.
Absolutely. The Jewish communities as well. We're frankly, given the demographic, which skews towards highly educated, towards white-collar workers at the upper end, we were completely out of touch, I think, with the base of voters out there in rural America. It was my 20th wedding anniversary. On Thursday, my wife and I went out to Fauquier County. We're driving down Route 15. We saw dozens of handmade Trump-Pence signs. Not a single Hillary, not a single Clinton-Kane sign. This in Governor Kane's own, Senator Kane's own state. Remarkable. And this sort of, the level of anger over Obamacare, the level of anger over being lectured, being condescended to about transgender bathrooms, about all sorts of social issues, about radical Islam, the palpable anger among sort of the Joe the Plumber electorate really came to the fore today, and Donald Trump embodied it beautifully.
I had a reporter who covers rural issues for a trade publication called Progressive Farmer, and he wrote a great analysis of this piece, and he also noted in it about how the way we talked about the election, even on television, college-educated whites and non-college-educated whites, that it sounded like we were saying smart people and dumb people. And what rural America heard is, and trust me, I should know better. My father grew up in rural America, was not a was a non-college educated white, and if he were alive, he would have kicked me in the tail. Because I saw it clinically, and I didn't see it, and it is a big regret of mine. Let's move to first 100 days in Donald Trump. I thought Dan Balls put it well. Nobody has any idea how he's going to govern. But there are 2 huge appointments that matter and a lot. Chief of Staff, National Security Advisor. What's it gonna be, inside or outside?
So a couple of things. I admire Dan for sticking to the reporter credo of don't write more than you know when
Right.
he said that we have no idea what he's going to do. And I have thoughts on that from having covered him in New York for a very long time, but I'll get to that in a second. For Chief of Staff, my money is on Reince Priebus. Of course, if Donald Trump were where we were saying this, he would instantly change it to say that the New York Times was wrong.
New York Times reports it'll be Steve Bannon.
Exactly, right.
Because everybody in Washington is praying that it's Reince Priebus.
Right.
Anyway.
I think that, so I think that Priebus and Bannon, who are the two leading candidates, but certainly not the only ones, right? I mean, to be clear, it's Trump's choice. There's other people he could pick. Indicate two very different governing philosophies, as you say, insider versus outsider. National Security Advisor, the main name I keep hearing is General Mike Flynn. I don't know whether that will be it, but that is who it was at the end of last week. To be clear, a lot of the transition work
I just heard a lot of gasps in there, and you're not. I've heard that gasp about General Flynn from a lot of people.
A lot of the transition work that had been done by Chris Christie and Jeff Sessions got basically ripped up on Thursday when Christie was getting squeezed and shoved aside. So you're going to see a bunch of different things. However, Bannon is an outsider, and he's got a reputation as a bomb thrower. He's not as much of a bomb thrower, actually, as he plays. He is actually sort of crafty and able to cut a deal, but he...
Hey, the guy made billions off of Jerry Seinfeld.
Correct.
So he must be a pretty crafty dude.
And he was at Goldman Sachs.
Yeah.
But Reince is somebody who would send a very specific signal. It would also inflame a whole section of Trump's supporters, so that's a risk that Trump would take. But here's the important caveat to remember. Trump, during his campaign, as you know, there were 3 different campaign staff shakeups. He had, by the end of the week last week, almost all of the fired people or
they were
people
back.
All back at the
Or
towers.
Lewandowski, back.
Back at the towers.
Paul
So-
Manafort's not quite back, but some of his guys are back.
But and sort of,
Yeah.
you know, had some contact with those folks toward the end. So Trump always manages by having, it's not even a team of rivals, it's like a team of like Bloods and the Crips, right? Like fighting at each other. So,
That is true.
And he's got his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who is his closest advisor, who will be there in some shadow capacity no matter what.
Ken, National Security Advisor will tell us a lot. General Flynn is one direction.
Sure.
What do you hear? What do you think?
Sure. The other direction I'm hearing is Mike Rogers, former chair of the House Intelligence Committee.
That sends a difference.
That's a very decidedly different signal.
Yeah, Hudson Institute colleague and friend, which would send a very different signal. And this is the big question of the transition. I thought it was an extraordinarily positive moment when my friend Mike Pence was put in, and the Vice President-elect Mike Pence was put in charge of.
How important was that for Washington to hear that?
It was very critical.
That's what I thought.
It said, okay, the games are over, we're now serious. This means the Vice President is going to play a very critical role, could possibly be the Chief Operating Officer, play a central role, and Governor Pence, Vice President-elect Pence is someone with sharp judgment, someone who understands how to be effective but low-key.
Is it fair to describe what everybody thought Cheney was going to be to Bush, and I think a lot of people underestimated, now in hindsight admit that they underestimated George W. Bush, that actually Pence will be that kind of powerful vice president?
I think he'll be a powerful vice president, but I think that this is a different kind of relationship than Bush and Cheney had. Vice President-elect Pence very much looks up to Donald Trump. He understands that he would not be there without Donald Trump.
So he knows he owes him a little bit.
He owes him.
Yeah.
He respects him. That's not to say that Dick Cheney didn't know and respect President Bush, but President Bush came in without the kind of internal Washington experience, and he himself was still finding his way early on. I think that, as we've seen throughout the campaign, that Mike Pence has been deferential to Donald Trump, and that will continue. So won't be quite the exact same relationship.
First 100 days, I think if it is Reince Priebus, isn't this a pretty predictable first 100 days? No more regulation, repeal of regulations, tax cuts.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think in the first 100 days, they will look for some tangible victory. I think that he will repeal President Obama's executive orders. I do think you'll see that. I think that you will probably see some progress put toward an infrastructure bill. I think they're serious about that. And the person to keep an eye on, to my mind, in Congress is Chuck Schumer. He is the person who I'll let that go.
There you go.
He is the person who Trump knows the best in Washington.
Oh, that's interesting.
He is the only person who Trump has any form of relationship with. And I started thinking about this morning.
Boy, that should scare the bejesus out of Mitch McConnell.
Just when he thought he was through. But Schumer is, when I was looking at how Democrats had criticized him, I mean, Harry Reid did what Harry Reid does, which
Schumer
is
didn't do it.
burn the house down.
Yeah.
Schumer didn't do that. He was much more careful, and I suspect that he will be able to use that with Trump.
Maggie Haberman, I always learn something from you. That's a pretty, but she's right. He is such a relationship guy, isn't he?
Absolutely, and that's going to be key, is sort of getting FaceTime with him, getting on the phone, being sometimes the last person to speak to him before a decision is made.
How about the influence President Obama apparently has already had on him with Obamacare? Or were you surprised by that?
A little, yes. I think it's, you know, these things are going to have to shake themselves out internally in the White House, on Capitol Hill and elsewhere, but it also sent a healthy message that we're not breaking all the China, that we're going to try to figure out ways to bring in reforms without...
Yeah, I think it's actually the main lesson from that, and I meant to say that before, is that, and you know this from covering him, Trump is very influenced by whoever he last talked to.
Yep.
And so I think that, and all presidents are to some extent, but
that's right.
But not quite like, but this is a different animal. You know, they spent 90 minutes in that meeting, Obama and Trump, and my understanding from everyone I talked to afterwards is that Trump came away a bit overwhelmed by the magnitude of the office and exactly what he's now in for. But I think if Obama wants to preserve his legacy, which is Obama's big concern in getting Hillary Clinton elected, talk to him every week.
You know, I know folks, chuckled at that, but there's something...
No, there's something...
I was just going to say, I was relieved to see, I saw that look on his face, and I got a read out of it too that said he does look like a man who suddenly realizes the weight of a job, and that's
that's not a bad thing.
That's a good thing, isn't it?
No, absolutely. I think it was clear election night, too, that all of a sudden he came out, he was obviously humbled and spoke to the entire country, and he understands that the duties on his shoulders are massive.
The ultimate Robert Redford moment, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now what?
We've used that one a few times this cycle, primary and then again now.
Has Donald, I want to talk a little bit here, because you brought up Bernie Sanders before. I want to go back to this. Are we going to look back on this election as the beginning of a new realignment in American politics, where the red and blue before this election was cultural? Gods, gays, and guns, to shorthand it. Are we headed for this, I saw David Brooks has it like in 4 quadrants, and only the way David Brooks can do it, God love him. But are we headed for sort of a globalist party, more of an expansionist, internationalist party, and a sovereign, hey, tap the brakes, sovereignty first party that in the next 20 years, Bernie Sanders and Trump end up in one direction, Paul Ryan and Hillary Clinton end up in another?
It's a great question, and I think it's too soon to say, but I do think that we will learn a lot both from how the Republican Party handles itself with the first year of Donald Trump, and we will learn a lot with who we see take over the Democratic National Committee and then emerge as the next wave of leaders. Because as I look at the Democratic bench right now, it's pretty depleted in the post-Clinton era.
Right.
And you're starting to see some positioning. The people who have thrown their hats in the ring for DNC chair, if not officially, have been floated. The main ones are Keith Ellison and Howard Dean.
Well, it's everybody coming from a Warren Sanders wing of the party.
Yep, and it's but it's directionally, Howard Dean is sent, even though he's an anti-Clinton person, it still sends a pretty different message, I think. I think that the Democrats really have to figure out, it is how to sort of de-identity politics their future, among other things, because that really is the race that Clinton ran. And so beyond that, I don't quite know what this looks like in terms of anti-globalist, working class. I think that it is too soon to say, but the differences in the Democratic Party were massively papered over.
Right.
And this is, I don't think a media failure as much as it is, I think the fact that the field was cleared for Clinton.
Too cleared,
yes.
I think in hindsight.
Yeah, but so the fissures, I think, are going to be more apparent there now.
What is the Republican Party, right? Is it the chamber? This isn't the Chamber of Commerce's Republican Party. Remember, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce endorsed Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's what I mean when I feel like we are.
Yeah.
Maybe we're going to look back at this, and this is a realignment election that takes 20 years for us to realize.
It's hard to say. I think it's definitely a party that's much more Jeff Sessions' Republican Party than the Chamber of Commerce is for now. Senator from Alabama. The question...
Nothing like a New York billionaire to sort of become this part of the party.
And then the question sort of becomes really, the major issue in my mind is what are the unexpected foreign policy challenges that come across the plate that could shift things dramatically. Trump could come in, as did George W. Bush, thinking he's going to be a domestic policy president primarily. And
remember, no nation building. I mean, he was sort of throwing, at the time, he was throwing a little bone to the sovereignty wing of the party.
Absolutely, and that changed dramatically, and if events could take things in a totally different direction.
Maggie, before I go, I'd be remiss. This was a hard election to be a Jewish reporter to cover. Talk about that.
This was a hard election to be a Jewish reporter. I think that no, I mean I'm not trying to be glib. I mean it's so I having grown up in New York City, I think that I was less exposed to sort of routine anti-Semitism, just when I grew up in New York City.
I'd never experienced it until this year.
It was staggering, and it started early. And one of the things that was an interesting moment for me in terms of covering Trump and realizing that we would be covering something different, and I didn't quite know what it would mean for the country, was, and where the country is politically, was the David Duke issue. And so when David Duke was praising him, or when, he was getting applause from white nationalist movements or white supremacists, and the ADL would issue statements saying, we call on him to reject this, and he wouldn't initially. And that was sort of unheard of for me. I mean, my previous jobs were at the New York Post and the New York Daily News. There was an enormous amount of, he didn't traffic in these things, he didn't condemn them either. And so his supporters took them as signals, especially as he was attacking large segments of the media. So I have gotten an enormous amount of hate email, hate mail, hate phone calls. I mean, in a way that are very, specific to me being Jewish and to my last name. And it's jarring, and I don't really know what it means for the future.
Final answer, Ken.
All that stuff is completely inexcusable, but one thing occurred to me Friday night as I sat down with my family for Shabbat dinner, is that this is the first time in the history of the United States that the daughter of the president-elect, her husband, and her kids are sitting down to Shabbat dinner, saying Kiddush, and saying the Motzi, and that's something that's absolutely remarkable.
All the more reason.
But it also cannot be a reason to say, therefore, I'm not going to have to comment on the other stuff either.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Michael, Maggie, Ken, thank you.
Thank you.
Michael, let me throw to you.
Okay, Chuck. Let's take a macro view of the next decade. The global geopolitical landscape is changing rapidly.
I can better.
And often Jewish communities get caught in the crossfire, as we've just heard. We have some special guests here today to discuss what we can expect in the next 10 years. Chuck?
Thanks very much. So they're not going to want me to introduce it this way, but basically we did the American election, and now what does this mean for Israel? Not just what does this mean for the Jews, but yes, what does this mean for us, right? Let me introduce my four guests here and get it right. Haaretz editor-in-chief, Aluf Ben. It's good to see him. From Israel's Channel 10, chief international correspondent. I'm told, that I would be second to you. I think Nadav Ayal. Jerusalem Post editor-in-chief, Yaakov Katz. And Tamara Wittes, senior fellow and director of Middle East policy at Brookings, and of course, a former member of the Obama administration. I want to begin with the topic I just picked up on anti-Semitism, because it is interesting here that just like with the rise of nationalism in Europe, and we saw a rise of anti-Semitism, a rise of a more nationalist-like candidate here, and we saw a rise of anti-Semitism. Does that surprise you?
No, it does not, because what we're seeing all across the Jewish world is a triangle of discomfort for Jewish communities. And if we would have spoken a couple of weeks ago, I would say that would be true mainly to Europe.
Never in America, right?
Right. And then I sort of read my Twitter feed and saw friends of mine getting up in the morning and discovering in their son's school in Bethesda swastikas. And this is not an isolated event like I think most people here in the crowd know. So something is happening also in America. And this triangle of discomfort is composed from right-wing, alt-right, white supremacists all across the world, radical Islamists with rising population of Muslim communities across Europe mainly, not in this country, mainly, and of course radical left-wing BDS style. And what really makes these things similar is the way that they recognize Jewish communities with Israel on the one hand, and the rise of every group within this triangle feeds off the other organizations or the other elements there, which is quite amazing. And this is the reason why we have seen a mini wave of Friend Jews coming to Israel, basically escaping a life in which, in Paris, when you walk to school today, you see armed soldiers in schools, to Jewish schools, protecting these Jewish schools. And unfortunately, and I'm saying this as someone who interviewed Jewish journalists in this country, Jonathan Weissman, I think from the New York Times and others, you're seeing a rise of anti-Semitic events together with the alt-right in this country.
And look, Donald Trump has pledged to be not just any friend of Israel, perhaps, as forgiving of Netanyahu as any American president will be on anything, right, Aluf? And so you would think that somebody who's pledged to be as pro-Israel as he's pledged to be, this anti-Semitic supporters wouldn't be rising up.
Well, I'm not sure that all of these, I'm not sure that those guys who did the swastika in your friend's school were thinking about Netanyahu or about Israel or about U.S. foreign policy. Right. And I don't think that Trump did that. So there is a distinction here. You know, us Sabras, I'm a second-generation Sabra, and one of the differences I see between us and people in the office who came from elsewhere, from Russia, from Britain, from America, is a very different feel for anti-Semitism. To us, it's something that, my grandmother used to tell me about. And in recent years, we feel it in a bizarre way. My next-door neighbors are a French family that spends 2 or 3 months every year in Israel. But you see that they bought this apartment as a kind of safe haven because they don't know what's going to happen. And that's a new phenomenon. And the question is, are we going to see more and more American families doing similar things if these events continue after the election?
Growing up in Miami, I can't imagine that.
But my colleague Chemi Shalev wrote a piece about that halfway through the campaign, and he anticipated a wave of aliyah of 1 million Jews fleeing the United States and coming to Israel and changing the face of Israeli society because of that.
You know what, Chuck, I think that would, if that's the outcome, then I think we've really missed something.
Yeah.
Because I think it's important for us as American Jews to understand the nature of the challenge. Those swastikas in Westland Middle School were not only directed against Jews, they're also a message to African Americans. They're also a message to immigrants. And the alt-right in this country is targeting not only our community and not only other marginalized communities, they're targeting the core of the civic nationalism that we are all bought into. That's what has made America a place where Jews can flourish in the way that we have. That's what we have to defend, is that core set of liberal values, and with it, the pluralism and diversity that we celebrate. We protect ourselves. Thank you. I mean, we protect ourselves by doing that, but if we only focus on ourselves, then we're not going to solve the problem.
Let me pivot the conversation here to Israel. What did Israel want with this election result, Yaakov?
Well, I think first of all, Israel owes America a big thanks because you, in this election, made our politics look normal. So on behalf of the Israelis here, I say thank you. But
don't normalize it, please.
No. During the campaign, it was easier and easier to explain Israeli politics to Americans like never before, I must tell you.
With that said, I think that if you actually got Bibi, if you got Netanyahu into a private room, and you said, just between us, who do you want to win the election? I would have guessed that he would have said Clinton. And the reason is because the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know. Clinton was predictable for Netanyahu. He's worked with her when she was Secretary of State, worked with President Clinton.
Probably personally friendlier.
Personally
right?
friendly. They know each other. And he knows, she's predictable. He knows, he would have known what to expect. He knows the people that would have surrounded her. Trump is an enigma. Trump's someone that you don't know exactly where he's going to go. He's, as we've seen just in the past few days, he's unpredictable. We have advisors of his who have been the so-called Jewish Israeli advisors. We've all interviewed them over the campaign.
And what do you
who
make
say we're moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem.
Who doesn't say that?
Well, who doesn't know?
No, what presidential candidate doesn't say eventually?
Settlements are not an obstacle to peace. It's going to be a reset on the two-state solution paradigm, and you already have the right wing in Israel, Naftali Bennett and other people.
Really believe in it?
Who are saying now it's time to rethink what the way to make peace with the Palestinians, if even there's a need for a Palestinian state. But then you have Trump, who just says in the Wall Street Journal yesterday that I want to try to make that deal. Yeah. So which Trump are we going to get? And I would just add one other point is that from Israel's perspective, part of Israel's military and diplomatic power is derived from its strong alliance with the United States. It's also from its military, from its purported nuclear program, but very much from the cornerstone of its diplomacy is its relations with the US. A strong and engaged America in the Middle East has a consequence of giving Israel strength. An unengaged or disengaged America, an America that's not involved and not interested in things that happen in the Middle East, is an opportunity for Israel's adversaries to take advantage of that situation. So what Trump are we going to get is something of a lot of concern for
Well, Henry Kissinger, in a quick interview with Jeffrey Goldberg in The Atlantic, said expect Trump to get tested early, that somebody is going to test to see what he does.
But look,
Go ahead.
with Netanyahu has had a very bad rapport with President Obama. Personally, ideologically, you name it. But in the end of the day, they managed to work very well together on very complicated issues in the Middle East. First and foremost, the crisis in Syria. In a different way, the crisis in Egypt. And keeping the Israeli-Palestinian conflict most of the time.
Don't forget playing mediator in Turkey. I mean, President Obama has played an important role in trying to fix that.
And giving Israel a lot of security cooperation and the 10-year deal and so on. But one thing that enabled Netanyahu to play that was his ability to play Congress against the White House. With Trump and the Republicans controlling both houses of Congress, there would be less room to maneuver if there is disagreement between President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu. For example, about the pace of moving the embassy to Jerusalem, is it going to be next week or the week after that? He will not be able to play the same policy that he did the Hill against the White House.
What does a stronger Russia in the Middle East mean for Israel?
Bad news, basically, for Israel. Russia there were so many attempts by this prime minister to approach Russia. And Israel has to be in some kind of good relations with Russia because of what's happening in Syria. So we have here a situation in which strategically the Russian army is in Syria. They have anti-aircraft missiles and radar detection systems which can operate well within the Israeli sphere. We have to be in a situation in which we engage with Russia all the time. So there's a red line between them. But after all that, and after all the reproaches made by Netanyahu, when Israel needed Russia again and again in the last 3 years, international institutions, specific things that we asked vis-a-vis Iran agreement, Israel got a no from the Russians. So if this president intends to pull back from American influence in the region and allow the Russians more lay back, for instance, in Syria, just allowing them to create that Shia-Russian alliance, stretching all the way from Tehran to the sea in Beirut, with Damascus at its core. If this is the idea, this is bad news for Israel, basically.
So how does Netanyahu respond?
Well, look, I think there's a big gap here between what Trump has said about the Syrian civil war and his desire to cooperate with the Russians in fighting ISIS, and what he said about Iran and Iran's role in the region. And if I were sitting in Jerusalem, I wouldn't really know which of those perspectives to give credit to right now. I think we're going to hear from Jerusalem, but I think we're also going to hear from a number of other capitals around the region that pent-up demand for American engagement, for a more assertive American posture, especially with regard to Iran. And that's going to make it very difficult for President Trump, first of all, to keep his promises about doubling down on the ISIS fight. But secondly, to meet the expectations of those in his winning coalition who want to see America less engaged in the world.
Yeah, that's the part of this, I think, that's his contradiction, political contradiction he's had to deal with. He's already backed off on the Iran deal a little bit by not saying he's going to scrap it, that he thinks he's going to renegotiate it. They think they're going to add something to it. You think he can have some success on that?
Look, I think it depends. If you ask in Israel today, definitely if you go to the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, and people in the defense establishment, you say, hey, do you want us to cancel the Iran deal? I think you'll get a flat out no. Israel today, especially from a defense perspective, enjoys the fact that the Iran nuclear threat has been that can has been kicked down the road for the next 10 years at least, and they don't have to deal with it. There's no need for any imminent military action or clash directly between Israel and Iran. Iran still plays a very dangerous role with its support of different terrorist proxies in the region, primarily Hezbollah and others, and its support of Assad's regime in Syria.
So you're saying Netanyahu doesn't want the deal now ripped
But
up.
I think
now that it's been
Netanyahu,
implemented.
who fought it tooth nail here in the United States in Congress, we all remember his speech here in 2015. I think today would say keep the deal, but ensure that it's enforced, ensure that the Iranians don't violate it, make sure you have sanctions that are in place to snap back at the moment something were to happen, but don't open it up.
You guys buy this?
No, but then going back to Russia, you have this Russian dictate that Netanyahu has to go to Moscow every other month to consult with President Putin because you have the Russian army, Air Force, as the strongest military power bordering Israel. So on one hand, it's a major headache. On the other hand, it's a stabilizing force because with Russia calling the shots in Syria, Hezbollah is less prone to engage Israel or cause trouble across the border.
That's a good hypothesis. I'm not sure it's true, but it's a good hypothesis.
So far it's working. But I just read a book about the origins of the Second World War by A.J.P. Taylor, in which he says about global policy in the 30s, that when Russia is not involved in international diplomacy, everybody else is happy about it. And when they're back, there's always tension and problems. And they were absent for 25 years.
But to your question, what's happening right now is that this president is going to embarrass politically the prime minister because he's cutting him to the right. So when the president said during the campaign, or the president-elect talked about tearing down the Iran agreement, his advisors talked about building in Jerusalem. That's a major political headache to this prime minister because he's being pressured by the right wing who takes this or uses it against the prime minister within Israel.
That's not where he wants to be, Netanyahu. Netanyahu doesn't want to be right now building in all of the settlements and starting to rethink exactly how to make peace with the Palestinians. He's very comfortable where he is, and this could change everything if there really is going to be that right turn.
In a curious way, I saw a picture going around. It said the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council. In a year, if Le Pen wins in France, it could be Le Pen, Putin, obviously Xi in China. You've got Trump, and then Theresa May. How about that for the New World Order?
Yeah. Well, it looks like that liberal international order, the one we built after World War II, is going to be led for the coming years either by Theresa May or by Angela Merkel.
Is Angela Merkel the leader of the free world? Is that a little, no, I don't. I saw that rolling around and it seemed absurd. But what does that mean when people say that?
Right.
What are they saying when they're saying Merkel is the new leader of the liberal West?
So who is it who represents and stands up for and seeks to defend not just the values that we established after World War II, but the institutions? And these are things on which most Republicans and most Democrats in the United States agree. Whether you're George Soros or Jeane Kirkpatrick, you believe in open societies, open politics, open markets. That's the liberal international order. That's what's under threat from this wave of populism. That's what's under threat from the subversive dynamics of Putin and China. This is what we have to defend. And I think if we can't work closely with our Western democratic allies, and I would put Israel in that category, then we're going to be in big trouble.
The 3 biggest powers in the world, China, Russia, and now the United States, are all led by sovereignty first leaders. Yaakov, that's different. We haven't had that before.
Look, and I think, Netanyahu to some extent might find himself, but at least by some people in that group. But Netanyahu, we have a lot of criticism of him in the media, and that's obvious, but there's also, you can give him credit where it's deserved, and especially when it comes to relations with Putin, right? And knowing how to maneuver. Syria could have gone a whole different way from Israel's perspective. And he's managed to maneuver that in a way that's kept that front for Israel quiet for the last 5-6 years of the Civil War. At the same time, with China as an example, he's recognized the decline of Europe, to somewhat also the relations that he had that were, to some extent, hostile here in the United States. He diversified Israel's trade, took a turn east, went to China, went to India, is now set to make a big trip in the next few months to Singapore and to Australia. So the understanding is that Israel needs to start to leverage its power, not just and keep it in one nest in the West, but also start to turn eastward.
That's the realist speaking. Now, if we talk about the moral dimensions of the civil war in Syria, and about those people who say that the stain on Obama's legacy is his unwillingness to stop the bloodshed in Syria, then historians might put Netanyahu on that list as well, because, again, from a realist standpoint, staying out of the war in Syria was the right policy for Israel, but not doing anything to help those poor people across the border, at some point in the future, people might ask question, what did Israel do?
Can I just tell you, there's a domino thing that somebody may put together. Syria, nothing's done. Migrant crisis, Europe, Brexit, Trump. That's not a zigzag. There's potentially a direct line. All right, out question here for all of you. Every president in my lifetime has made a claim they're going to be the ones to help create, to finally have, there will be the Israel-Palestinian deal. They'll cut it. Trump himself said it's the ultimate land deal, right? He's a real estate guy. He can do it. Who does real estate better? Who can handle land swaps like Donald Trump? Does he try, and when would he try? And would he have a realistic shot? Tamara, you first.
Sure. So look, I think the circumstances on the ground are not propitious. That's been true for a while. Within Israeli domestic politics, you all know better than I. Within Palestinian politics also, though, we're on the cusp of a leadership transition. We don't know who's going to come after Mahmoud Abbas, but we know that he may be the last simultaneous head of the PLO and the Palestinian Authority, the last person fully empowered to negotiate that deal, if he was fully empowered to negotiate that deal. Right. So on the one hand, there's that uncertainty. On the other hand, we also know from all of the previous efforts that if this conflict isn't somehow actively managed or moved toward resolution, it tends to degrade. And we could so easily end up in a crisis.
It's like you need the process, even if it doesn't get to resolution, just because if you don't have it, war breaks out. Do you guys agree with that?
War or intifada or some other international trouble or what have you. Yeah, and that's why I guess Trump, regardless of what was said by him or on his behalf during the campaign, on his first interview, of all the international problems, he comes up with that deal, which is not on the focus these days.
But Aluf, do you believe it's real or it's just a talking point? He has to say something which is globally is being asked. Yeah. Generally speaking, this is going to be, I don't know, probably, Chuck, probably better. This is going to be very much focused domestically in terms of this administration, much like the Obama administration first term.
Every administration thinks it's going to be domestic. Until, as Mike Tyson said, it's like everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah.
Every president thinks they're going to be a domestic president until the international world punches them in the face.
Yeah, but then this President Obama, got punched in the face in Syria, and like you sort of talked about that domino, he decided to stay out.
Well,
here we are today.
That was before he intervened in Libya and before he intervened in some other places.
There might have been some influence by the outgoing president in his meeting with Trump, because we have the 70 days and the decision about the Security Council resolution and the Obama legacy in the Middle East.
Wow.
And Trump might have slightly referred to that. Maybe they discussed it, because that's an issue that's on the table now.
Mm-hmm. All right, and that has to be the last word. You guys are great. Thank you very much. Let's give them a round of applause. And thank you. I think, Michael, I throw it back to you.
Thank you so much, everyone. And it must be very good to be Chuck Todd some days. And I would also say, wouldn't it be nice if we just buy Tanakhs for all the world leaders? So let's keep this global tour going and take a personal lens to Federation's work around the world, starting with Clarita Cassin. When she had to leave South America, Federation helped her create community in her new home in Miami.
Yes, Michael, it was very true. My family and I had a beautiful life in Bogota, Colombia, in a compassionate, close-knit Jewish community until the country became so dangerous. 2 cousins were kidnapped, even one was killed. We had no choice. My husband and I decided to flee the country with our 2 young children and come to Miami.
When you left, did you think that you would be leaving forever?
Well, my husband said that we were. I thought we were coming back, and my husband said, say goodbye to Colombia because we're not coming back. And we made our new home in Miami, but we still missed the Latin Jewish community back in Colombia. So we tried and started a Cuban Latin Jewish social club of our own, but then we heard about Federation. And they enabled us to go to our local Michael Ann Russell Jewish Community Center and make it our base. And with their support, we proudly formed a Latin division of Federation. And for decades now, and we're still going strong.
Well, that's just an incredible, great story of partnership and working together from Latin America to Miami. Around the world, Federation and our partners, the Jewish Agency for Israel, the Joint JDC and World Ort, have been doing this exact work for many decades.
I'm so proud of my community and Federation, and we've benefited so much from the kindness of others, and we feel so lucky to be able to give back. So, gracias, Federación.
De nada. Now, we're going to travel to Ukraine, a land divided in 2. Conflict has displaced and impoverished people in the east. But in the western Ukraine, there is a surprising growth and Jewish revitalization. We are there for both.
We fled our home in Lugansk with just 2 suitcases. What we left behind was our friends, our home, our way of life.
This is the first generation of young people who are able to be Jewish, who are not suppressed by the history of the Soviet Union, of the Holocaust, who are able to express it and to be openly part of the community.
On the one hand, we have been servicing and caring for tens of thousands of Jews in deep need. On the other hand, we have been doing our best to develop a thriving Jewish life and Jewish culture.
JDC helped us and others to start our lives again. They have given us moral support, which has helped us so much on this very painful journey.
25 years ago, we had to smuggle in books in order for people to be able to connect to their heritage. Today, we're witnessing a thriving Jewish community that enables people to actively and openly practice.
Growing up, I had no idea that I was Jewish. I had a friend who had learned about his Jewish roots and found birthright. And that inspired me to go back and learn to see if I had any. It turns out I did.
My mother told me she did grow up with a sense of knowing that her mother might be Jewish, but she didn't know for sure until after the Soviet Union collapsed and her family could talk about it.
After my first trip to Israel, I joined Metsuda and was able to learn what it means not only to be Jewish, but to be a Jewish leader.
The Metsuda Leadership Program, it is a mixed curriculum of leadership skills. The goal is to create active, involved members of the Jewish community.
It's an exciting time to be Jewish right now. There's lots of opportunities, seminars and things like that young Jewish people can take part in.
Now I live in a house where I can help inspire other young Jews connect to and find their own Jewish identity. We come together for Shabbat and other events and reimagine what Jewish life will look like here in Ukraine.
If there's any hope for the Jewish community in Ukraine, you're definitely looking at it. They're going to be the ones that are going to bring back a great community into this part of the world.
I was born in Israel and raised there for the first half of my life. The second half I spent in Cincinnati. Throughout all of it, I was fortunate to be part of a vibrant Jewish community. But my parents, who are originally from Ukraine, are part of a generation of Jews who either did not know or could not express their Jewishness. So when I learned the JDC Entwined program would enable me to spend a year living in the country of my heritage, I didn't hesitate. I knew I had to go. But to tell the truth, I didn't expect what I found there. People my own age who are incredibly energized, eagerly learning about Jewish holidays and traditions, committed to reimagining Jewish life and creating a new Jewish future. People who sing the songs of their ancestors on Friday nights. People who genuinely support their friends through their Jewish journeys because they know that's the only way to create a future in Ukraine. But they're not the only ones to know that. The Federation movement has known it, has been working towards it for years. And not only in Ukraine. All around the world, the Federation is there, helping to support the reimagining of Jewish life. And as the first person in many generations in my family to be openly Jewish, I can't think of anything else more exciting.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your 2016 GA co-chairs, Cynthia and David Shapiro.
Welcome to GA 2016, everybody. We are so honored to be here and so honored to be co-chairing this great event. You know, in some ways, David and I are two of the most unlikely people to chair a GA focused on Jewish journeys.
Cindy and I both come from families that were relatively unaffiliated.
Mine was actually anti-organized religion of any type.
And mine was extremely skeptical of any kind of ritual religion.
But at very different points in our lives, something propelled us to take a different road. Something motivated us to start our own Jewish journeys.
In my case, when I went away to college, I became very interested in philosophy and the meaning of life and things like that. And spent a lot of time searching for it, found no answers. And then I got married and kids came along and I went to work and I got involved in company building and trying to make a lot of money. And by the time I was 50 years old, I found that I had succeeded on the business side, more than I expected to actually. And I kept feeling this sense of discomfort. I wasn't answering the question of what is the meaning of life. So a friend of mine and I, he was having a same sort of career as I was, started saying there has to be more than this. Perhaps Judaism has something to say on this subject. We sort of figured Jews are pretty smart, and the smartest Jews have been studying Jewish religion and philosophy for 3,000 years. And we were in the position where we were rejecting it basically without even knowing what it was. So we decided to, what we called at the time, hire an extremely orthodox rabbi to teach us. And that actually turned into what for me since then has been 25 years of learning with the same man. And it's changed me enormously. I've become more interested in ritual, observe more rituals, and basically it's changed my life.
And for me, a simpler story. Like many of my generation, I was a very strong cultural Jew. I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood. My friends were all Jewish. Israel was my hero. But things changed for me when I left home and went 3,000 miles away, sight unseen, to a small liberal arts college in the Boston area. It had a tiny Jewish population. Being there awakened the spirit of Jewish in me. Frankly, at first I was embarrassed when a friend of mine started taking me to Shabbat and high holiday services, either on the Harvard or MIT campus, for obvious reasons, because we didn't have any at Wellesley College at that time. I mean, boys or services. And I realized that I didn't even know the basics of Judaism. I felt a huge gap in my life and in my education.
By the time Cindy and I met and got married 9 years ago, we were both on different points of our Jewish journeys. I think actually that one of the things that brought us together was the chance to explore our Judaism as a couple.
For David and me, our learning and our journey is part community, part intellectual, part spiritual, and part integration of Jewish rituals into our daily lives. We are as deeply interested in the why of Judaism as we are in the what.
The Talmud says that to be truly Jewish, we should study, pray, and do mitzvot. Everyone's Jewish journey is unique, and we must each travel our own road. However, whenever we are on that Jewish journey, I think something that is really important is that we truly respect that each of us is a good Jew no matter where we are on the journey. What we really want to do is empower each other to take charge of our own Jewish lives and to want to do that.
And so the primary reason David and I wanted to chair this GA was to give you this message and to showcase the role that federations play in providing a diverse array of Jewish journeys. The Federation movement itself is a Jewish journey, one in which Jewish learning and engagement are critical aspects, and we think the most exciting.
The GA is an invaluable opportunity for all of us to get together, share our thoughts, share our experiences, share our communities, and hopefully to move down the Jewish journey together.
And we can't think of anyone more inspiring than our next speaker, an internationally acclaimed Judaic scholar and authority, a thought leader, an award-winning author, and truly a major personal inspiration for us. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks.
Yeah.
Wow, you were terrific. Oh, wow. Friends, thank you for leaving your notes. I just think I'll forget my speech and say that last one again. Beloved friends, it's so great to be with you. And on behalf of all of us, I would like to express our thanks to the driving spirit and CEO of JFNA, Jerry Silverman. An enormous vote of thanks to the chairman of the Board of Trustees, Richard Sandler. And I want to say to these wonderful, incredible co-chairs of this GA, Cynthia and David Shapiro, forget about me inspiring you. It is you who have inspired us. But really, my thanks to all of you at JFNA, the organization that touches and changes more Jewish lives than any other in the world. Chevra, you and I, we have work to do. You see, the trouble is, since we last met, the world has gone mad. I thought in Britain we had something called Brexit, which I claimed was the most divisive campaign in the world. But what can I do? I have to concede that, as with the Olympic Games, we just have to settle for second place. You have just had a presidential election which, dare I say it, is almost as acrimonious as a synagogue board meeting. Not quite, but almost there. And meanwhile, we have seen in the rest of the world the return of anti-Semitism, the rise of the far right in Europe, in France, in Austria, in Hungary, in Poland, and in Greece. We have seen whole countries, whole swathes of the earth's surface, not just in Syria, but in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Libya, Somalia, in Yemen, in South Sudan, descending into what Thomas Hobbes called the war of every man against every man, in which life is nasty, brutish, and short. We have seen Russia turn aggressive, Iran become ever more dangerous. The world is in a state of crisis. What do Jews do when the world is in a state of crisis? Never forget, never waste a crisis. We have a precious moment. Let me explain. All those years ago, when I used to be chief rabbi, I used to travel around the British Commonwealth, what used to be called the British Empire. So I used to go to Hong Kong. In '97, the Chinese said, please, could we have our Hong Kong back? And so I still kept on there. I went there and met for the first time the Beijing appointee, the governor of Hong Kong, Mr. Tung Chee-hwa. And we had a wonderful conversation. He loves Jews. He said to me, Rabbi Sacks, we Chinese and you Jews go back a long way. He said, we Chinese go back 5,000 years. You Jews go back 6,000 years. What I want to know, Rabbi Sacks, is what did you do for the first 1,000 years before you had kosher Chinese takeaways? I said, Mr. Tung, you want to know what we did for the first 1,000 years? We complained about the food. But do you know why it is that China lasted so long? Because the Chinese ideogram for crisis also means opportunity. And when a country and a civilization sees a crisis as an opportunity, it is not derailed, it is energized by crisis. Now, there is only one language I know that goes one better than Chinese, and that is Hebrew. Anyone know what the Hebrew word for crisis is? It is mashper. Now, do you know what the word mashper originally meant? It meant a birthing stool. Every crisis for Jews is chevlei leidah, something new is being born. And that is why, when crises happen, we as Jews have to lead the world to a better place. And that is the challenge I want us to accept individually and as a people. And how do we do it? The answer is in the theme of this conference, by starting, each one of us individually and collectively, a Jewish journey that will help change us and help change the world. What is a Jewish journey? The answer is contained in the opening words of the parashah of the portion of the Torah we read just yesterday in our synagogues, the first recorded syllables of Jewish time. When God says to Abraham and Sarah, Lech lecha, begin a journey, get thee out. From your land, your birthplace, and your father's house. And so began the world's oldest, longest, and greatest journey of all. And we have to move on that journey to the next stage. What do we learn from those words to Abraham and Sarah at the beginning of Jewish time? 3 things. Number 1, uniquely Judaism begins with a journey, with 2 journeys. With Abraham's journey from Mesopotamia and with Moses and the Israelites' journey from Egypt. Why? Because we are the people who can't stand still. Did you ever see a group of Jews standing still? It never happened. We know that we have to move, and we have to lead from the front. And that has defined Jewish sensibility from that day to this. Because where others accept, we protest. Where others curse the darkness, we light a flame. Where others live with the world that is, we strive for the world that ought to be. To be a Jew is to help heal a broken world. We are the people who don't stand still. We are the people for whom life is a journey to a world of justice and compassion and healing, which is not yet, but which we will not cease until we help bring it about. And that is the first thing we learn from Abraham and Sarah, that we as people have to journey and travel and grow. Second thing, lech lecha. What do those words literally mean? We translate them as get thee out, leave. But the Hasidim pointed out that the words lech lecha literally mean get to yourself. Become the person that you really are. Have the courage to be different. Have the courage to do the Jewish deed. The really great Jews are the ones who are unashamed to be Jews and to do the Jewish deed. Think of the people we have recently lost, but who will be remembered for decades to come. Leonard Cohen, who taught the whole world to sing Hallelujah. Baruch Hashem, most of us sing it a little better than he did. But Leonard Cohen taught the world to sing Hallelujah. Elie Wiesel, who taught the world to remember what so many wanted to forget. Shimon Peres, who taught the world that a Jew never stops searching for peace, however long the road and however hard the way. They were unafraid to stand up and be proud as Jews. And if there is one thing I have learned from decades in public life, it is non-Jews respect Jews who respect Judaism. Every one of us is an ambassador for our people and our faith. And when we are true to ourselves, we are a blessing to the world. When we are what we uniquely are, we give the world what only we can give. And that is the second message. Be true to ourselves. And the third message has to do with the politics of the world. The world is moving into a new and dangerous phase that I call the politics of anger. And the politics of anger comes from where? It comes from fear. And we as a people are uniquely poised to show the world the one antidote to fear, which is the greatest Jewish gift to humanity as a whole, the gift of hope. Israel is the country whose very national anthem is Hatikva, meaning the hope. What makes people despair? Let me tell you what makes people despair. We think to ourselves, how can I change the world? How can I make a difference? There's only one of me. There's 7 billion people out there. I am no more than a wave in the ocean, than a grain of sand on the seashore, than dust on the surface of infinity. But I want you to think of this. Tell me, who is the most influential human being who ever lived? To be honest, there's only one candidate, and that is Abraham. Because today, literally or metaphorically, the people who consider Abraham to be their ancestor in faith are 2.4 billion Christians, 1.6 billion Muslims, and a few of us. most of whom happen to be in this room today. But what we lack in numbers, we more than make up for in noise. Now, Chevra, this one individual, or these two individuals, Abraham and Sarah, think about it. They ruled no empire. They commanded no army. They performed no miracles. They delivered no prophecies. All they did was heed the call of Lech Lecha to begin a Jewish journey and to define for all time what it is to be a Jew. And these are what we learn from Abraham and Sarah. To be a Jew is to be true to your faith and a blessing to others regardless of their faith. And that is the greatest message of healing that the world needs to hear in the 21st century, and we have to deliver it. Friends, that was all I was going to say until I suddenly realized there's one thing in addition I probably ought to say. Tell me, when you're looking at journeys, you know how long it took us to get out of the station in Washington today? Everyone's going one way, right? Now tell me, are there more people queuing in America to go to Iraq or queuing in Iraq to go to America? Where do people travel? They travel from poor countries to rich ones. They travel from low civilizations to high civilizations. What was the highest civilization in the days of Abraham? Mesopotamia, Ur Kasdim, where he came from. Everyone else is trying to get in. He's leaving with Sarah. What was the highest civilization in the days of Moses and the Israelites? Answer, the Egypt of Ramses II. Everyone else is trying to enter. Moses and the Israelites trying to leave. We are the world's contrarians. Everyone's going that way. We're going the other way. So let me make a simple suggestion. You know as well as I do that when the world is united, Jews are divided, right? Now the world is divided. Let's us do the opposite thing and show that we are united. And I want to tell you, it begins here in JFNA because you are the group who welcome every Jew, who respect every Jew, who honor every Jew, and let it start from here. But I want to add one more thing. Listening to the panel, hearing about your fears about anti-Semitism, which I share with you, I have to say this, for heaven's sake, if we are seeing anti-Semitism in the world, let us fight it together. Let us never be guilty of having anti-Semitism in here. Let us, if some people in the world don't like us, let us respond by showing that we love one another. Let us be at peace with one another if we want to be at peace with the world. Because I tell you this from the depth of my heart, when Jews stand together, no force on earth can ever prevail against us. That is the Jewish challenge in these challenging times. Number one, let each of us undertake our own Jewish journey. Number two, let us do the Jewish deed and be proud to be Jews. And number three, let us remember that we can change the world the way Abraham and Sarah can change the world. Because if we truly believe that nefesh achat ka'olam maleh, that one life is like an entire universe, then all you have to do is change one life, and you've begun to change the universe. The only way we can, one life at a time, one day at a time, one act at a time. So when out there is despair, let us bring hope. When out there is hurt, let us heal. And when out there is division, let us show that we are enlarged and not diminished by our differences. Let us show the world what it is to stand together and respect one another. Therefore, I say this, never waste a crisis, never stand still. Go out there, continue the Jewish journey, and be a blessing to the Jewish people and to the world. Thank you.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jem, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.